and absolutely nobody touched that browser window. Everyone was patient, so thank you at home for that. I appreciate it. I'm Becca Scott. Marshall Sutcliffe and Reed Duke are here on this lovely MPL Weekly day. Oh, friends, I'm ready to talk about this next match we're going to watch in the lower final. So let's see the bracket first, and we can see what we've seen so far, what's coming up. Of course, Manfield just went straight to the grand final.
Right, that's the really important part, right? Because he gets to sit over there and wait for everybody else to duke it out down here. But we're going to be going down to the lower left corner where, yes, this is double elimination if you're in the upper bracket, but on the lower, you lose your out.
Yes.
And you're playing, by the way, for the privilege of playing against Paulo Vitor Damarosa, one of the 5 best players ever to play the game. So the road, if you're sitting in Martin Juza or Shota Yasooka's seat, is very long and very tough.
What would you be thinking if you were them today, Reed?
I'd be thinking I have my work cut out for me. I mean, it's we set up the day by saying 4 Hall of Fame players, and to win the tournament from this lower bracket position, you have to beat all 3 of them, including Seth Manfield twice for your troubles.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Would you just quit? Would you just say, what's even the point of trying?
I think I'd at least throw my hat in the ring, give it a try, but it's a tall order. But that's what we play for, right?
Well, let's see the head-to-head the players we're going to watch. So we have Martin Juza and Shota Yasooka Esper Control for Shota, and Simic Nexus, which we just watched under the control of Damarosa. But Juza's in control this time. So what do we think about this matchup?
Well, for anyone who's just coming in, Becca, Marshall, and Paul set up at the beginning of the day the fact that these players could switch decks between the Swiss round play and the top 4. Now, the one player who chose to stand pat is predictably Shota Yasooka, the control master.
Yeah.
He has his preferred style of play. He does it. Even if you know what he's bringing, it's still pretty tough to beat him. Esper, of course, famously, a pretty well-rounded deck with good tools against a variety of strategies. However, it is pretty clear to me from looking at both the archetypes and the particular card choices that Juza was sort of aware of this. He suspected that he was going to have to fight through Esper at the start of his day, and he brought this Simic Nexus deck, which tends to excel in the slower matchups. And in particular, he's using a new card from M20, Drawn from Dreams. So this is a 4-mana sorcery. You look at the top 7 cards of your library, you put 2 in your hand. Notably, it does not say draw a card on it. So that means it cuts through Narset, Parter of Veils. Being a sorcery, it's not affected by Teferi Time Raveler. So 2 of Yasooka's most potent weapons against Nexus, Drawn Through Dreams, is a great foil to both of them.
And that was replacing Chemister's Insight, which is a little put at a disadvantage with Narset out.
Precisely.
And Teferi.
Right. And little T, causing trouble.
Yep.
Ooh, okay, so we do have a piece that Corbin has done about how Martin Juza did in his round-robin play, and a little word from Martin himself.
If you don't respect Experimental Frenzy enough, it will beat you. That's what Martin Juza said about this week's split of the Magic Pro League. People just didn't have enough answers to the card. It sounds simple, but it was the secret to his success this week and his run to the top 4. This may be the core split of the MPL, but it was more of the spark this week as both Juza and Paulo Vitor Damarosa showed up with mono red lists taken straight from 3 months ago. Just a week after most of the field showed up with fresh new lists of black-white vampires, the deck Juza recently called the best deck in Standard, the Hall of Famer sensed the metagame would be weak to old-fashioned burned as players adjusted to beat the Bloodsuckers, and he was absolutely right. With few hate cards to fight through, Juza lit his opponents on fire this week to earn his 4 wins and his ticket to the top 4, though things actually started off a bit rough as he fell to Luis Salvato and his sideboarded Cerulean Drakes. It turns out protection from red is pretty difficult for a mono-red deck to beat. But after that, he got things going with a victory over Seth Manfield, with a clutch Direfleet Daredevil coming off the top in the 3rd game to steal a Thought Erasure and make Manfield discard his only spell. Juza followed that up with 2 quick wins over Jessica Estefan and Shota Yasooka, burning his way through Esper decks that found themselves sorely missing Lyra Dawnbringer to fight the mono-red menace. Against Estefan, he was even able to recover from getting 2 runaway Steamkins exiled by a single Legion's End. Juza flooded the board again in that game and even got her down to 1 life. But she was able to pull off a huge turn of her own and stabilized with Hero of Precinct 1 and Deputy of Detention. But one life is not safe against Mono Red, and a shock off the top delivered Juza the victory in dramatic fashion. Next up was Yasooka, who had some hot tech of his own this week with Bolus's Citadel and Command the Dreadhordes in his Esper Control deck. And Command the Dreadhorde did make an appearance, as Yasooka used it to turn Yuza's own creatures against him, going down to 7 life but taking control of the board. But sometimes Mono Red just doesn't care about the board. It has the burn, and 7 damage of burn spells later, Juza had stolen the game. Tybalt was the hero of the second one, flooding the board with tokens and preventing Yasooka from gaining any life at all. That sent Juza to the victory and put him to 3 wins on the week. Next up came another Esper deck, this one from Eric Froelich, and the pair turned in one of the wildest games of this week. Froelich landed in early Teferi at a healthy 15 life, and looked to be in control of the game after Juza had to throw 2 burn spells at it. But as Juza told us, Experimental Frenzy is a heck of a card. Alongside Chandra, the enchantment provided an endless stream of value for him as he began to churn through the cards on the top of his deck. And yet, Froelich hung in there. He kept the Teferis of all sizes coming, and along with Hero of Precinct 1, actually pulled himself back into the game, inch by inch. But try as he might, the frenzy was just too much. Juza kept casting spells, making mana with Runaway Steamkin, and then casting more spells. By the time he had finally burned Froelich out, he had just 12 cards remaining in his library. And then when Froelich stumbled on mana in the second game, Juza found himself with 4 wins, the magic number. Juza actually went on to drop his final matches, but it didn't matter. His bet on Bolt had paid off, and with 4 wins, when the ashes had settled, he found himself edging out Luis Salvato on tiebreakers to clinch his spot in the top 4 with Mono Red aggro.
Like, okay. His name is Kropik. He is a little ginger cat that hangs out with me on the stream. Pepper died. He doesn't speak English, as people think in my Twitch chat. He doesn't speak Czech either. He speaks cat. So we were looking at the decks from the previous split with Paulo, and we thought there was going to be a decent amount of vampires again. And we wanted to have a deck that had a decent matchup against vampires while also being decent across the board. So I thought it was going to be a good time to bring back Mono Red, which kind of fallen off the radar. Like, this deck got no cards from the new set, but it was really good before then. So because it got it got no new cards, people kind of stopped playing it. So people kind of also stopped respecting it or stopped, putting sideboard cards for it into their decks. And we just thought it was a good idea to bring it back. I think Shota is very likely to stick to the same deck. Like, he's been playing this Esper deck for quite a while, and he also thinks the same thing. Like, he thinks I am going to be also sticking to Mono Red, because I played Mono Red for a couple months. So Shota will very likely think that I am going to stick to some kind of aggro. I will very likely switch to something else. It'd be great to play the finals with Paula, but if I'm making the finals, I don't really care who's the other opponent. All 3 of them are excellent players, whether it's Seth, Shota, or Paulo. So it doesn't really matter who is the person I'm playing against. But obviously, if it's not me winning, I would like Paulo to win the most out of the other 3. But all of them are great guys, and all of them are my friends. So it's just the fact that we're like testing together.
Rooting for his buddy there.
Kropik?
Yeah, Kropik, obviously. I think Kropik should win this whole day, this whole bracket.
Wow, I think that Martin just got a lot of fans by introducing
I'm
Kropik.
one of them.
Me too.
Absolutely. That is a cute cat. And not all cats fall into the cute category. Some cats, kind of not the nicest.
I wouldn't
I'll
know.
censor
My
myself.
cat is adorable. So
Sure. I'm just saying, they're not all across the board.
I'm not saying
Opinions?
anything. There's
Read
going to be a cat
opinions,
owner that
cats
is
versus dogs.
self-conscious, and they're going to blame us for it. I'm not. Don't say anything.
But if you stream
has
at
cats.
home, you could really up the value of that stream by adding some cats in, or at least 1 cat. There's a limit. There is too many on the scale of cats as well.
Yeah,
What's the number, Becca?
3 is too many.
3's too many.
I was not expecting Becca to launch into this anti-cat crusade.
Well,
Yeah.
I do have
She has a cat too, and it comes second place to her dog. I know the
Absolutely,
truth.
100%.
She
It's
runs
not
the show.
nothing about this is hidden. I
Yeah.
tell the cat every day he is second in love to the dog, and
So brutal.
he's indifferent about it. He's completely indifferent.
That's the good thing about cats, is they're indifferent to most things.
Absolutely. But what do we think about the switch? Obviously, he said right there, Martin said that I'm not bringing mono red because he expects me to bring mono red, and I know what he's going to bring because Shota is probably very much in love with his Esper Control deck and will continue to bring it.
This is the interesting thing here, right? This was the one predictor that the players felt confident about, was that Shota would bring this deck, and we saw half of our top 4 bring this Simic deck as a response to that. And Martin's the one who has to play him. So it actually worked out for Martin, at least in theory.
I think this is working out really, really nicely for Martin. I mean, Shota's deck, even among Esper decks, which is one of the slowest archetypes in Standard, Shota doesn't have a lot. He doesn't have the hero of Precinct 1. He doesn't have any creatures in his sideboard. So he's really relying on taking firm control of the game and maybe even trying to eventually win with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria Emblem. That's pretty slow. That's a lot of time for the Nexus player to make their land drops, to find an answer to whatever permanent-based disruption you might have, and eventually combo off.
Right, and as you mentioned before, and I'm sure we'll hit this when we look at the deck list, but there were certain card choices that seem even more well-positioned against him. So this may have paid off big time for Martin Juza.
Absolutely. Do you think Shota was maybe expecting more vampires than we see?
He doesn't care, right?
No, it doesn't matter.
I don't know.
The sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, and Shota Yasooka brings
plays
Esper
control. Yeah, it's kind of the
Okay.
truth. It's true. It's like, I think that he may make different card choices, but he's not breaking out of that mold unless something shoves him out of the way.
Well, it works well for him because he's here in the top 4 of this bracket on the MPL Weekly. And let's go through, we have Rich Hagen who's going to take us through Yasooka's round robin play. Let's see that now.
Yasooka didn't fare well against Mono Red this week. Already having been beaten by the Red Menace and Martin Juza, here at least Legion's End and 3 Basilica Bellhorn won him a game against Paolo Vita Dama de Rosa. It couldn't win him the match, however, and Yasooka was 0-2 against Mono Red. Now things were rather different against Esper Hero. He won 2-0 against Jessica Estefan. That's 7 cards, Bolus's Citadel, 2 Planeswalkers and an Oath of Kaya, enjoying the view of a nearly empty opposing battlefield. Here's Yasooka in action against Alexander Hain. You know what's bigger than Elite Guard Mage, a 2-3 that gains 3 life and dies to Kaya's Wrath? Basilica Bellhorn, a 3-4 that gains 3 life and doesn't die to Kaya's Wrath. Yasooka went on to take Game 2 and the match with Planeswalker dominance and some Elderspell insurance policies he never needed to cash in. Now here's the view from Eric Froehlich's side of the table, trying to stave off multiple Basilica Bellhorns. Those things are good, so's Commander Dreadhorde. Shota took the game and then the match with another ferociously silly Bolus's Citadel. That completed 3 2-0 sweeps against Esper Hero, and despite a loss in the mirror to Seth Manfield, Yasooka's split effectively came down to the last matchup against Jeskai Planeswalkers with Luis Salvato. So here's Shota's opening hand. Remember, Salvato is on Jeskai Planeswalkers. See that Elder Spell? Yeah, that. Salvato made it 1-0 in the Planeswalker department before Shota equalised with Narset. Khan made it 2-1 for Salvato. Back came Yasooka with Teferi Time Raveler. Then Sarkhan the Masterless turns up. That's Planeswalker 3 for Salvato, and beatings ensued. Yasooka, he didn't care. He was ready to rock with Flash, RR, and Teferi Hero of Dominaria meant 2 untapped mana for the Elder Spell. Oh dear, that's 13 counters on Teferi. Salvato was playing Jeskai, no Planeswalkers. In Game 2, Salvato had 3 Planeswalkers on the board, and then he didn't. You know I love the Elder Spell, right? Same game, later, Salvato wouldn't go away. Here's Narset finding Khan, Sarkhan finding the battlefield, and Salvato finding the Kill Teferi button. Salvato, now with 3 Planeswalkers on board, piled in. Surely he was going to win. Watch carefully now. That is Bolus's Citadel. That's Teferi Time Raveler. That's Teferi Hero of Dominaria. That's Thought Erasure. That's Narset Pod Rebels. That's Oath of Kaya. That is unbelievable magic. That's what that is. And in the match that really mattered, Shota Yasooka had secured his place in the top 4 playoffs.
And there you have it. That's how Shota got into this top 4 bracket of the Emerald Division. And we also have a quote from Shota. Well, last week there were 6 vampire decks in the round robin, and the top 2 were vampire decks. I thought this week everyone would think to try to beat vampire decks. I thought Juza will use mono red, and PV will also use mono red or some type of aggro deck. I thought Esper Control can play well against other control decks. It plays okay against Nexus and Scapeshift. It has some disadvantage on aggro decks, but I thought I could be okay, is what Shota said in his reasoning for why he brought the deck he brought. Whew, what do you think about that analysis of the metagame, Reed? Obviously, we know not exactly what those players brought.
He missed pretty hard.
Well, that's the same story we're hearing from a lot of our players, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense. The first split of MPL weekly play, we saw vampires being both enormously popular and enormously successful. It was certainly the deck on everyone's radar going into the second week, and now what you choose to do with that information might differ slightly from player to player. Do you think people are going to bring vampires, or are people going to bring the deck that beats vampires? But it sounds like Shota was well prepared for either case. He even mentioned Nexus and Scapeshift as possible decks that he might be prepared for. He said they're okay matchups. Yeah, I mean, I think he both had good analysis and what Becca said a moment ago, that, you know what, he's probably just going to play Esper regardless.
So in September, we have 2 more divisions playing. You are in one of those divisions, Reed. Does this change this format that we're doing, where if you're playing in an earlier division, every other player is watching that play and basing their analysis of the metagame off what happens in these weeks? Does that totally change what perhaps you might think to bring?
It does totally change things. One thing about the standard format in particular, as distinct from maybe the eternal formats or limited play, is it moves really fast. So having sort of your fingers on the pulse of the metagame, watching what happens on MTG Arena, on Magic Online, and the live paper tournaments, and of course the MPL weekly play, it really does inform both technology and learning the matchups of the decks, but also just the way things are trending, and trying to outguess your competitors is proving to be a somewhat important part of this MPL weekly play.
Absolutely a full-time job through and through. All right, we do have Shota's deck to show you. Shota Yasooka has brought this Esper Control deck. And what do we see that's unique here?
Well, these are interesting because you see a lot of the same core cards that you'll see in these decks, primarily the Planeswalkers. But then people, especially in Esper, you have so much flexibility here, Reed, where Shota could have really geared his deck to whatever matchup he thought he was most likely to face. Kind of reading the tea leaves here, what does that look like to you?
Well, the one card I'd really like to emphasize, it comes towards the right of your screen, Unmoored Ego.
In the main!
In the main deck. Now, Shota said, I think Martin and Paulo are going to bring mono red.
Yeah.
This, of course, is not a card you put in your deck with the goal of beating mono red, but this shows how well-rounded Shota and his Esper deck are, how circumspect he's being in terms of, you know what, I might predict wrong, let me be prepared for that case. And this one of Unmoored Ego, this is a card that if he draws it, particularly in game number 1 before the Veil of Summer's coming off the sideboard, he's just going to win because of that one card. So this is a way to spin what otherwise might be a very challenging matchup into, you know what, I scored an easy win, now we're going to the sideboard and I only need 1 out of 2.
Yeah, let's see what he could grab with that Unmoored Ego in the sideboard here. What do you think is ideal?
So off the sideboard, it's tricky because there are great weapons that the Esper deck can turn to against Simic Nexus, things like Duress and Dovin's Veto, but the Simic player sort of has the trump card in Veil of Summer, this hugely impactful new printing from M20, a huge reason to play green, in particular one of these green ramp combo decks. That's going to be a foil to Duress and Dovin's Veto. One of the stories of our first feature match with Seth Manfield and Paulo Vitor Damarosa, I think, was the Duress versus Veil of Summer dance, and Seth in the end electing to not even bring in the full complement of Duress. So, the way that those cards wind up lining up, the way each player chooses to approach that battle is going to be very telling.
Yeah, I think there may have been a couple of cards missing on the first slide also, because I see that, there's a Bolas' Citadel in the main, kind of the 2 big heavy hitters that he has are the Bolas' Citadel, and then of course he's got Teferis and the, it looks like we're just going to go to Juza.
Yeah, we do have Juza's deck up now. This is the second Simic Nexus we've seen, but this one has, as you were mentioning, Drawn from Dreams.
Right. So if you watched our first feature match, this is going to play out pretty similarly to what Paulo Vitor Damarosa brought. Both decks, blue-green, based around Nexus of Fate, looking to develop their mana and use Wilderness Reclamation to sort of power through everything. The main difference here is the Drawn from Dreams. In addition to some 1 and 2 of differences, this card is really a fundamental difference in the card drawing engine of the Nexus player, and this one is chosen to line up particularly well against Yasooka's main countermeasures, which, as we mentioned, are Narset, Parter of Veils, and Teferi Time Raveler.
Let's see the sideboard.
So, Veil of Summer, the key card, we mentioned this lining up particularly well against Thought Erasure, Duress, Dovin's Veto. These are some of the main weapons that Esper is going to try to use to dismantle the Nexus player's game plan. Veil of Summer beats all of them at a very, very low price tag. Now, that's the only card that I see as an obvious inclusion. Where Juza decides to go in terms of cards like Negate and Shifting Ceratops, I think is a little bit more flexible. Those are certainly appealing tools, but the cards in his main deck are good also. It'll be interesting to see if he finds the room.
Yeah, I like the addition of Shifting Ceratops in the sideboard just for simply its existence, because it forces your opponent to respect it.
Yeah,
right?
keep them honest.
Right. It's like if Shota says, the traditional thing that you say against Nexus is, well, I can just take out all my creature removal. I'm just not going to need that at all. But if Martin decides, you know what, I'm going to throw you a little curveball here and throw in a few of those Ceratops, then all of a sudden he's got this threat that's actually quite difficult to interact with on really any way. It can't be countered, and it has protection from blue, so it's going to come in hard, and it hits really hard too. It's 5 power, and it can have haste, so it's like it can end the game very quickly or kill a planeswalker out of nowhere.
Speaking of curveballs, before we get into the match, we got a quick little mini game for Reed to play here called Keeper Mulligan. It is exactly what it sounds like. We've got some slides here, and I want to know, okay, so we are going first, so we're on the play, and we are Yasooka here. What do we do if we know our opponent is on the Simic Nexus? Is this a keep or is this a mulligan on the play?
This is a keep. Now, the interesting thing here is...
This is super interesting.
You've,
I love this one.
You've picked 3 cards on the left side of your screen that are particularly ineffective in the matchup, right? Cry of the Carnarium, Disfigure. There's basically no creatures in Yuza's deck, and Command the Dreadhorde is just dreadfully slow. But you have your mana, and you have Unmoored Ego, which is your single best card in the matchup. So I'm saying I keep this. You know, it's a pretty challenging matchup, but at least I'm going to have my single best card. I resolve this. I take away their Nexus of Fate or their Wilderness Reclamation, whatever I pick based on the situation. And then I'm going to go into the mid-game playing the game I want to play, make it really, really difficult.
It's that, Unmoored Ego is that good. It's that much of a silver bullet that you keep basically a 4-card hand here as it sits just to get to it.
Yeah, now there's also, this hand brings up something that I believe is a fallacy of many players when they approach their mulligan decisions, which is you could use your language, which is, okay, this is effectively a 4-card hand. I have 4 cards that are going to be useful. The thing is, you're going to take a mulligan, you're going to shuffle up, you're going to draw 7, you're going to have these dead cards anyway. He just has too many of them in the matchup, so it's not like you're trading 4 for 6, you're probably trading 4 for, well, 4 again, you know, if you're going to have a couple creature removal spells.
So you may as well have your best card.
Yes, yeah, focus on the best cards and not the worst card in a situation like this.
Makes sense to me. Let's see the next one. All right, we are once again on the play, same situation. How does this hand look?
Okay, this one's a little bit more challenging for me. I like the lands and I like the Narset. Now, there's some things to not like about the hand, including you're missing your second blue mana, but for the most part, I think this is about what you sign up for when you bring Esper Control, which is that you're going to be slow in the early turns, use a card like Narset to maybe slightly off-balance your opponent and develop your own game plan a little bit, but I'm keeping this. I'm using the Temple of Silence to try to scry to my second blue mana, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. Let's see number 3, Keeper Mulligan.
Okay, now I do want to position this as we go to Yuza's side of the matchup in that Yasooka has a lot of things going against him in the first game, those dead cards, a pretty challenging matchup. Juza has it all. This is the matchup he wants to play. He's heavily advantaged in game number 1, so he can have a little bit higher standards. That said, I think this hand is totally fine. Search for Azcanta is probably the single best card you can have in your opening hand. In particular, going first, he gets to slip it in underneath the Thought Erasure. So once you get the Search for Azcanta, filtering your draw steps, you'll find your second blue mana, you'll find your green mana. This is going to be totally fine. Again, focus on the early turns, the rest will fall into place.
Awesome, great advice right there. Focus on the early turns. And our final slide of Keep or Mulligan.
Okay, I think this is the most challenging one that we've seen so far. Now, Root Snare is basically a dead card in the matchup, and unlike when we looked at it from Yasooka's side, Juza doesn't have a ton of dead cards, so he can mulligan and say, you know what, maybe I'll find a Root Snare in my 6-card hand, but I'll put it on the bottom via the London Mulligan rule. This is pretty slow. He doesn't have Search for Escanta. He doesn't have Growth Spiral. And again, we said the matchup is good. His standards can be a bit higher. I think this is a borderline hand that I'm inclined to throw back.
I'm keeping it.
Yeah?
Yeah, look
Why?
at that. Temple of Mystery. It'll find me everything I need.
It will, but your hinterland harbors are coming in tapped. Did you notice that, buddy?
Yeah, that's brutal.
Ooh,
I
so
don't
many
like that
tap
so much. Put Search for Escanta on top off of the scry and then not be able to play it turn 2 anyway. I'm still keeping it.
You're keeping it.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
always keep. I keep everything.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I tend to keep because the fear of having less cards. I don't know. Card
Look,
advantage.
this is how I envision it. So it's the 7 cards I have, plus the next 5 or 6 off the top of my library. Right? I'm gonna see those cards. He's not killing me before I get to there. That's why I have like a beautiful balance of spells and lands and
Sure.
have a little faith.
I like to make sure I can get 1 or 2 plays. I don't listen to my advice because I'm terrible, but I do play a lot. All right, our match is ready, so let's see how the pros do it. Maybe learn a thing or two.
All right, Reed, let's get into the action here. Looks like we've got Martin on the lower part of our screen. Now, this is our lower bracket, so this is an elimination game, or match, I should say. If whoever loses this one's done. They're done for the top 4, and their run will end here. So how do the opening hands look from your perspective here, Reed?
Well, they actually both look kind of in the same vein as the hands that we covered in our Keeper and Mulligan section. Yuza with, the dead Root Snare. He's not going to be too happy about that. Nexus of Fate a little slow, but he's got his mana and he's got turn 2 Search for Escanta, so he's pleased with that. On the other hand, Yasooka just, going to develop his mana and play a Narset on turn 3. Certainly not flashy, but again, that's sort of what you sign up for with the Esper deck. Maybe he can dig for his Unmoored Ego.
Double Root Snare now. Is the best case scenario for a Root Snare for him to just basically put it into his graveyard?
I think so. It's going to depend a little bit what his opponent does, but yeah, I mean, that card is basically just as valuable in the graveyard to flip the Escanta as it is clogging up the hand.
Yeah, we've seen that Shota does have the ability to attack with Basilica Bellhaunts in his main deck here, but come on. That's not how you're losing if you're sitting at Martin's.
No, the best outcome there would be maybe I'm going to get 1 extra activation from my Tameo by fogging your Bellhaunt for a turn, but he's not really worried about his own life total.
Ooh, here we go. Drawn from Dreams.
Yeah, so 2 really nice options for Yuza here between Tameo and Drawn from Dreams. I like putting the Planeswalker out there, particularly because of that passive ability, protecting your other spells from Thought Erasure.
Yeah, that makes great sense. And also, I gotta say, we are already starting to see a little bit of the upside there. A Drawn from Dreams can be cast into a Narset Parter of Veils for no downside. If that were, any of the other options that people play, he wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one of the things about the Nexus versus Esper matchup is, on paper, inherently, it should favor the Nexus deck. This is a deck that's designed to prey on other slow decks. It doesn't really have to worry about his life total. It can focus on developing its mana. The Esper player is going to give you plenty of time to do that. But Teferi and Narset are such a headache for a deck like this. And so Yuza positioning himself to circumvent those countermeasures really put himself in a good position for playing against Yasooka.
Of course, the downside here, though, is very real, right? It's a 4-mana sorcery that Martin just had to run out on his main phase and just say, okay, does this resolve? And Shota said, no, it doesn't. I'm going to play Delvin's Veto on that.
Yep, and here you see Yasooka using his small number of relevant cards to just dismantle his opponent. And this is why you see Yasooka so content to just be a master of this Esper deck. It's well-rounded. It rewards him for his surgical precision in terms of play skill. And yeah, now he's fought himself to a great position, even though the matchup and the opening hands both seemed pretty heavily in favor of Yuza from my perspective.
Well, now the shields are down, though, and this means that Martin can resolve Drawn from Dreams if he chooses to, though it does look like he's hemming and hawing a little bit about whether to go for Narset or Drawn from Dreams, so decision time for him.
It's a tough position because Drawn from Dreams, it's sort of a one-shot and done, whereas a Planeswalker, you get multiple activations if you can stick it on the battlefield. However, if I'm Yuza, I'm really, really focusing on developing my mana here, and the fact that he's going to miss a land drop when he casts Narset is not very appealing, but the passive ability here, shutting off Teferi, is
Well,
is
also
huge.
interesting, Martin did not activate Narset Parter of Veils here. Now, I'm assuming that that was not intentional. There are some matchups where it's actually correct to just leave Narset at full value, but I don't think this is one of them. So I think that Martin just just pass the turn on accident there.
Yeah, I can't really think of a
and
compelling
he just
reason.
lost the Drawn from Dreams too, Reed.
Yeah, I think you're right, Marshall. I think you accurately assessed that one. That is going to happen when you play Magic on MTG Arenas. It's possible to skip your priority for a turn. That's just something that you have to navigate with and sort of pick yourself up and continue from there.
Now, chat brings up that he could be just playing around the Oath of Kaya.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. That actually is a pretty compelling reason, because especially when Juza made that play for the purposes of the passive ability, stopping the opposing Teferis, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. You're going to get to use it next turn anyway, so might as well wait. And yeah, I'm going to amend my previous statement and say that was probably intentional.
So he gets to shut him off for a turn, but then he ended up cashing it in anyway. He could have chosen to just leave it at 5 and kind of make it really difficult, right?
Right. I think that's not really a winning battle, since Juza would have had to pass the turn with no
Just
effective
do nothing,
play.
yeah.
But with all his mana open and a sort of a clear green light to cast whatever he finds, I like his decision to first not use the Narset on the turn he's tapped out, and then use it the turn that he needs some action.
Makes sense. Unfortunately for Martin, this one has really started to fall apart for him here. He's now facing down 3 different planeswalkers on the other side of the battlefield and really needs to get something rolling quickly. That pair of root snares in hand just rotting away.
Yeah, it is a bit unfortunate. Those are the 2 worst cards in Juza's deck for the matchup. He drew both of them relatively early, so those are just sort of cinder blocks weighing him down in his hand. He can't really cast those in for any value. And yeah, Yasooka just capitalizing on every small stumble to get his planeswalkers onto the battlefield, using their abilities in the way to maximally disrupt the Nexus player. And now he's put himself in a commanding position. Speaking of commanding positions, I think we're going to see Command the Dreadhorde add even a few more planeswalkers to the battlefield, including maybe the Tameo from Juza's graveyard.
We see Blast Zone down there for Martin Juza with a couple of counters on it, and that is one of his best ways to interact with opposing planeswalkers, at least to get rid of them. But in the meantime, once again, it's a trio of planeswalkers for Shota Yasooka, who is now taking control of this game in a very real way. You can see his hand getting better and better and better. And he's forcing the issue here on Martin, who is going to level up to 3.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of good news for Martin Juza. However, it's a tough way to do it. You're already struggling to find your 7th mana for Nexus of Fate. You don't really have anything going. Now your opponent's putting you in a position where you have to sacrifice one of your lands. Ugh. And the thing is, like, it's a temporary measure, but how are you going to actually turn this around and navigate to a victory?
Also, he's got more problems than just the 2 3-mana planeswalkers. Those ones are wreaking havoc with his primary game plan, but he will lose the game to Teferi, Hero of Dominaria in a few turn cycles here if he doesn't get something going or dedicate the Blast Zone to killing that. It kind of feels like he's in one of those positions where either route looks unlikely to bring him a victory, so he has to decide the one that brings him the most, even if it's not particularly high. And it looks like he has decided for the Teferi, Hero of Dominaria plan here, because he did not crack the Blast Zone there, so that's going to give activations to the smaller planeswalkers.
What you tend to see from this Esper deck is the snowball element. Once you start untapping with planeswalkers, adding more planeswalkers to the battlefield, filling your hand, having more good spells to cast each turn, it becomes very, very difficult for the opponent to come back once the Esper player has gotten a little bit ahead. And that's basically what happened in this game. Juza had a couple of good turns early in the game. Yasooka was able to successfully dismantle those, including the crucial Dovin's veto on Drawn from Dreams. And then it was just pretty much impossible for Martin to get his footing after his opponent had those planeswalkers in play for so many turns.
You talked about how Martin's hand and really his strategy at this point has just been fairly well dismantled by Shota, and you can really see that here, right? Martin is now in a position where he's going to put another, no, I'm wrong. I thought he was going to put a couple of counters on the blast zone, but it looks like he's decided against that line.
Oh, wow, Marshall.
Is he really going to Elder Spell at instant speed here in response to this blast zone read?
That's exactly what he's going to do. Now, this was a little bit of a waiting game. Normally, this, sort of secret move of this Esper deck is sometimes you can Elder Spell your own Planeswalkers, your Teferis and Narsets that have, exhausted their usefulness, and you can emblem your Hero of Dominaria right away. Now, there was a little bit of a jockeying for position there in that Yasooka could not go for that immediately because Juza had the ability to respond with Blast Zone, but there you see Yasooka taking advantage of the Teferi, Time Raveler, both passive and active abilities, allowing him to operate at instant speed when his opponent could not, and finding the timing and the way of lining things up that he needed to win.
That was nasty. That was disgusting. So that ended up with Teferi on 10. Then Shota had the draw step thought erasure, and Martin said, okay, fine, I've had enough. Let's move on to game number 2. So we are in sideboarding here in our lower bracket. If you're just joining us, welcome along. Marshall Sutcliffe with Reduke. We've got Becca Scott and Paul Rietzel here as well. And this is Shota Yasooka versus Martin Juza here in our Emerald division. Mm-hmm. That was a statement with a very strong period at the end of it, not a question mark at all. And this is the lower bracket. So what this means is that the player that wins this gets to move on to face who ended up losing the opening match of the upper bracket. In this case, that's Paulo Vitor Damarosa. I was going to say the Hall of Famer, but in fact, they're all Hall of Famers here in our top 4 for Emerald. So this is the deep end of the pool for sure. But the loser of this one's done. They will not get another chance to defeat anybody here. So this is a big time one here for Martin because he finds himself down a game against Shota, and he needs to right the ship here if he's going to advance.
Yeah, and I think that first game was the one he really wanted to win because now after sideboarding, the Esper player gets to tailor the deck in order to be more effective for the matchup. So that means taking out those dead creature removal spells, Cry of the Carnarium, Disfigure, whatever it might be, bringing in extra disruption. Now the saving grace is that card Veil of Summer is probably the single most impactful sideboard card that either player has access to. However, I think the more dramatic change is going to be on Yasooka's Esper side of the matchup.
Okay, nice opener here for Martin this time around. He's got double opt and search for his Kenta, and he even has a negate in his hand for down the line, and has found 2 copies of Tamiyo Collector of Tales. So good hand.
Yeah, very perfect. Again, the turn 2 search for his Kenta on the play, coming in underneath the Thought Erasure. That's crucial. And with great follow-ups, a 3rd land, multiple action spells, double opt, not only to smooth the draw, but also fill the graveyard at an accelerated rate.
He's got to like what he's seeing here. He has an option to keep an island there. He decides against it, really, really favoring as much as possible getting cards into the graveyard for search for his Kenta to get flipped, even though the truth is he'd like to see another land. He just knows he's likely to do so with the combination of his draw step and the opt.
Now, I'll tell you, we are going to see a very, very important turn here. Whether Yasooka decides to go for the Unmoored Ego right away or wait, what he decides to name.
Yeah. There's one unknown card.
Yeah, one
so
unknown card.
Like,
it's not really going to get any better for you if your opponent does have Veil of Summer. And here, Juza is going to try to find it.
Oh, it was search for his Kenta number 2 off the top of the library. And this is huge. Unmoored Ego will resolve. Now Shota has a couple of options. A lot of times people just name Nexus of Fate and call it a day. But Wilderness Reclamation is also a potential value engine for a deck like this that you could consider naming as well. Maybe even a win condition. Let's see what he names.
Yeah.
Most people just name Nexus, at least when I've been playing, they don't think even this long. They just name it right away.
Yeah, now this is sort of like reading a mystery novel for me. Like, I could speculate on what I believe is the best card to name, but I won't really know what the best card to name is until Yasooka tells me the answer. Right. Looks like he's going to go for Tamiyo Collector of Tales, which of course was known. 2 copies in the hand, so it's nice to get those away. Don't forget the extra clause of Unmoored Ego is Juza's going to be able to replace those cards by drawing fresh ones, so it's not a devastating resource advantage, but it is going to take away one of the most threatening weapons that Juza has access to.
One of the cards also that Martin Juza has a one of in the main deck of is Nissa, who shakes the world, which is a card that you can very easily lose to. That's the type of card that can run away with the game if left unchecked. So it's one of those things where Shota, look, I trust him.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, so the risk there is if you name Nexus of Fate and your opponent gets to run haywire with Search for Azcanta, Tamiyo, Collector of Tales, Wilderness Reclamation, they could get so far ahead on resources that they're able to set up a situation where, you know what, Nissa or Shifting Ceratops backed up by a bunch of Veil of Summers and counterspells, I can just win a fair game even without comboing off. So that's the situation that Shota was playing around in naming the Tamiyo, Collector of Tales.
Here's Narset Parter of Veils now for Shota. This is the interesting middle part of this game now, where Martin doesn't have it going on quite yet, but he's getting close to having Wilderness Reclamation plus a Transform Search for Azcanta, which is very powerful card draw and card selection engine that he can lean on to try to find his win conditions. But in the meantime, look at the hand here from Shota. He's got a pair of Dovin's Vetoes, another Narset, and a Teferi Hair of Dominaria to help give him a win condition and card advantage engine as well.
I'm glad you highlighted that, Marshall, because that is one of the more fascinating aspects of this game is Yasooka sitting on the double Dovin's Veto, but he hasn't yet passed a turn with that card available to him. He's instead prioritizing, let me use my sorcery speed weapons, my Planeswalkers, my Unmoored Ego, to develop an advantage. Then when I'm ready, I can start sitting back on my counterspells to protect that advantage. Now here, this is going to work out a little bit poorly for him, going for the Teferi in the main phase. Yuza able to find negate for it. But again, Shota is just ready with an even more powerful 6-mana sorcery next turn if he's able to find it on tap land. Bolas' Citadel. Ooh.
Hello, Drawn from Dreams here, off of the Growth Spiral. I can go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I actually like Martin's position here because the combination of Wilderness Reclamation and the Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, in addition to his deck just being jam-packed with card drawing spells, he's going to get to use a tremendous amount of mana every single turn to just stock his hand with weapons, and it won't take more than a couple of turns for Martin's hand to look just as good as Shota's hand does.
And take a look at this. There is a copy of Shifting Ceratops there at the back of that pile from Drawn from Dreams. So this is now getting kind of interesting, right? There's a lot of different options here. He can, this is something that you'll see pretty commonly as well, is a player has a choice to take another card draw spell plus an action spell with these, dig through time style cards, and that's exactly what Martin's done here.
Yeah, and it's the Wilderness Reclamation that allows him the luxury to do that. His mana is not his limiting factor here. And it begins.
So he gets an extra turn here, he finds an opt, and dig, 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 he will go. And of course, if you do play this deck on Arena, the first thing you should do during your turn is set that end step stop, because oh boy, it's brutal when you skip through it.
I've learned that the hard way a few times.
It's really rough. But Martin, of course, is up on that. So here we go, Drawn from Dreams. Again, remember, Show just tapped out. Like, this is the time to go right now for Martin Juza. And what does he see here, Reed? Well, there's another Drawn from Dreams.
Yeah, so you're seeing a pattern here. With access to enough mana, these cards can just chain together while providing value. Now, I did happen to catch a glimpse. We sort of glossed over it, but during sideboarding, I think I saw Martin shave down to 2 copies of Nexus of Fate, which is okay. He's still going to be able to find them when he needs them, but it does lessen his ability to, as we say, go off and take the rest of the turns in this game. So whereas in game number 1 from this position, it might have been lights out, there is still some chance that Yasooka is going to get another turn in this game. We'll see.
And again, he has the same choice here. He is now chaining Drawn from Dreams together and found a Nexus of Fate here, Reed. So there's the untap. And there's the Nexus again. It's a lot harder to do so with only 2 copies, but he is chaining it together. Martin Juza putting together maybe a run. There's a Veil of Summer. He doesn't want that off of the opt. He's can't draw his card off of that. Whoops. And Yeah, I guess that's just a scry there for Martin, and now goes back to his turn. Another copy of Search for Azcanta.
Boy, when you see that Narset light up like that, you feel really thankful for the Drawn from Dreams rather than Chemister's Insight.
Seriously.
It would be a much, much different game if Martin did not have access to this particular card from M20.
And there's another one. Now, did he find a card draw spell that he can actually use? He did. It's Narset Parter of Veils.
So if you're sitting at home, you haven't really seen this Nexus deck in action. This is what happens is it uses this tremendous amount of mana that's facilitated by Wilderness Reclamation to just continue stocking its hand. Almost every non-land card in the deck allows the Nexus player to draw more cards, see more cards, find Nexus, find more card drawing. In addition, you have this element that as the game progresses, your library is getting smaller and smaller as you draw more cards. Nexus of Fate repeatedly gets reshuffled. So as the game progresses, the density of your deck in terms of action cards and specifically Nexus of Fate goes up and up and up. So the longer this goes, the more Martin's able to tread water, spin his wheels here, the easier it's going to be to continue finding Nexus of Fate every single turn.
It's starting. The news is tightening a little here, though, Reed. He did find another copy of Wilderness Reclamation, so we can look to the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin as his primary card draw source now. But if you look, he drew Growth Spiral, which won't get him a card. He didn't find... he didn't find any of his other kind of go deep into the library type stuff. So it's sort of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin or bust at this point.
Yes, that's
but
true.
With double Wilderness Reclamation, he gets a lot of looks.
Yep, so his library is only slightly over 30 cards at this point. He gets to see 12 every turn. So yeah, definitely not guaranteed, particularly with having sideboarded out some copies of Nexus. However, you can see from his hand that how much value he's generated just from this little partial string of turns means that he can probably say go and not be in too terrible shape. All right, I think that's it. I think he's going to have to end his turn here.
So he didn't go off.
No, it was just a partial, value string of turns. But look at his position now. He's got more lands. He has double Wilderness Reclamation. He has Blast Zone and Azcanta the Sunken Ruin as value cards. And he has 6 cards in his hand. That's from a position where he was pretty much cleaned out a few turns ago after the Unborn Ego.
You want to see some cards, Reed?
I do.
How about a Bolus's Citadel on the stack here from Shota Yasooka?
So what Martin could do is he could cast 1 Growth Spiral or Veil of Summer in response to just see if he finds a negate. He's checking his graveyard. How many negates do I even have left in my library? I think the answer is 1. So he's just going to let it go. And it seems that maybe Yasooka got a bit unlucky there. Glacial Fortress on the top of his library. No immediate value from Bolus's Citadel. That was sort of his one chance. Okay, so now starting your turn with double Reclamation, Azcanta, Nexus of Fate in hand, I'm going to say I would be surprised if Yasooka gets to play any more in this game. I think we're going to see Martin just, navigate carefully for the first couple of turns, try to chain them together by finding Nexus of Fate, and then it will become pretty obvious that the Nexus player is dominant in this one.
So what does a win look like?
Well, in practice, it usually involves the opponent seeing writing on the wall and conceding. If that doesn't happen, of course, there's a high-stakes match, and Shota's under absolutely no obligation to click the concede button. Martin will eventually just make enough land drops, generate enough extra turns, and then put Nissa onto the battlefield. Mm-hmm. And once you start time walking with Nissa, it only takes 3 or 4 turns to actually just deal 20 damage. So it won't be too painful of a process.
Yeah, we did see those Ceratops as well, right, when he was looking through his library earlier.
Yep, that could make it easier as well.
Okay.
Opponent at only 16 life, that's just 4 attacks.
Wow, you did the math that quick?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Stick with me.
Wow, I'm with this guy. So now he's going to actually get to bank a couple of turns if he'd like. That's Nexus of Fate number 2 going on the stack here.
Now, in some ways, this is a bit of a treat. The Nexus deck is so powerful that sometimes when you get to this position, it doesn't really matter the order or the choices you make. You just sort of play your cards in the obvious way and it works out. But getting to see a player the caliber of Martin Juza actually navigate the careful sequencing and trying to do all these many different choices optimally in the correct order, and making the correct choices. It's nice just from an academic's perspective to be able to see this happen, and you can really learn a lot from it.
This is all about maximizing at this point. There's another Nexus of Fate there, and that library has gotten small enough that it seems like, as you said before, this is getting at least verging towards deterministic.
Yep. Yeah, so part of the, some examples of what I was talking about a minute ago, the sequencing is, let me use my growth spirals and get the maximum number of lands into play before my Wilderness Reclamation triggers. Let me cast my Nexus of Fate at the earliest possible time in the turn so that my future card draw spells can redraw that same Nexus of Fate that gets reshuffled. Little things like this, you sort of think about them, but it's very challenging to navigate all these decisions carefully and optimally. Yuza's going to do his best and put on a show for us.
And there it is, Nissa Who Shakes the World, the best win condition that he had available left. Again, the Ceratops were in the deck, but those are harder to find with, you can't find them with Narset or with Search. So there we go. Game number 2 goes to Martin Juza. Great stuff from him. He found himself very much up against it against Shota Yasooka here, and finds a way to equalize and force the Game 3 decider in this elimination match.
Boy, so that was impressive. I think if you had forced me to predict the winner of each of these games from the start, I would have predicted both incorrectly. In game number 1, I really liked Yuza's position. I felt that the pre-sideboarded situation favored the Nexus deck a lot. And then in game number 2, Yasooka seemed like he had it all. Those Dovin's Vetoes, the resolved Unmoored Ego, potentially his single best card in the whole matchup. But there were a lot of choices, a lot of judgment calls that Yasooka made that ended up kind of not working out. He did name the Tameo with the Unmoored Ego. Shields were down for Yuza to draw Wilderness Reclamation that turn and then eventually combo off. Decisions like when to cast your spells at sorcery speed versus when to pass with Dovin's Veto, and Yuza was able to sort of thread the needle and get through all of that disruption.
Okay, so is this going to be the hand for Martin Juza that takes him on to the next stage? No, not that one. He's going to send it back.
Looks like both players mulliganing quite a bit here. Or both players have mulliganed once so far. I'm sure that Yuza will be content with this one. This is a good hand with turn 2 Growth Spiral. The biggest decision, of course, is going to be what to put on the bottom. I'm inclined towards the Opt. Opt is sort of a hand smoother type card, but when you already have everything, who needs smoothing?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. This is a nice hand, isn't it?
It's beautiful, yeah. Growth Spiral is just how you want to be starting as the Nexus player. Just getting that mana underneath you feels really, really good.
Martin, looks like he's trending towards Opt as well, but still taking a moment here to make sure that he's doing exactly what he wants.
Boy, look at that 6-card hand from Shota. That is duress Narset. That is just going to hammer the Nexus player, particularly on a mulligan.
Wow, and it looks really good against what Martin has here specifically, right?
Right, you take that growth spiral out of the picture, suddenly this hand goes from like a 10 out of 10 to ugh.
And this is interesting because it looks like Martin, while his first inclination was to get rid of the Opt like you thought, he actually hedged a little bit and said, you know what if my opponent has duress?
Yes.
Then having an Opt actually matters in a fairly significant way, and it really paid off for him, so very astute play there for Martin Juza, because now he'll have something to do next turn. And unfortunately for him, the Hinterland Harbor would enter the battlefield tapped, so he just has to kick things off with Forest and pass the turn back. Another duress in hand for Shota.
I would personally lead on Hinterland. Well, actually, it's kind of interesting. I think the book says to lead on Hinterland Harbor there in case you draw Temple of Mystery, but the value of playing Forest and representing the Veil of Summer does have a little bit of value, and Shota actually did not go for the second duress. I wonder if that was the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, he knew his hand outside of the one unknown card, and he probably just figured, well, you can have your Opt. I'll see you next turn. And like you said, he gets to play around Veil of Summer by doing so. So there's a lot to gain there.
So this is the card that Martin is looking at with Search for Escanta. He is going to elect to keep Tameo on top, even though he does not have his 4th land lined up. Counting on maybe Opt to find it. Ooh, and now this turn, Shota is really just crossing his fingers that there's no Veil of Summer. One of the most powerful things about Veil of Summer is it does protect you for the entire turn, so there's no follow-up. It's not like you counter the first duress and the second one can get you. You actually protect yourself for a full turn. But in this case, Juza does not have it.
Man, Shota really able to tear apart the hand here of Martin Juza. The thing that I start to look for when I see these hands that are really heavy with hand disruption are, what are you doing after? Right, because you often see this pattern where a player has a bunch of duresses and thought seizes in other formats here, thought erasures, and they just rip apart their opponent's hand, which is exactly what's happened here. But the question becomes, if both players just stare at each other here for the next 4 turns drawing cards, Martin can rebuild, right? Where if Shota next turn gets to play some powerful planeswalker that can get him more cards, like say Narset Part or Veils that he has on top of his library here, he can propel himself into the mid and late game and maintain this advantage. If he's not able to do so, then it sort of just sets both players at square one, and then they both rebuild from there, and that actually gives Martin a chance.
Right, particularly with that Search for Azcanta in play.
Right. I mean, all those cards are going to the graveyard, right? Like, flip over at some point here. So this is an opt from Juza in response to Narset from Shota, and he sees his own copy of Narset Part or Veils. Does he want it? He's thinking. He's decided against it. And unfortunately, he found a growth spiral.
So he's on this every other turn pattern in order to circumvent the Narset passive ability. He can't cast Growth Spiral or Opt on his own turn. He can't cast 2 in the same turn, so he's going to have to wait a full turn cycle before he can really use that Growth Spiral to any effect.
Narset extremely annoying for this deck for multiple reasons.
Oh,
but
hello.
look at this. Shifting Ceratops off the top. And if he taps his mana right, green.
Doesn't have
doesn't
triple
have
green.
triple green. Brutal. The haste ability on Shifting Ceratops allows it to get in and kill a planeswalker pretty often,
and
you
you
can't
saw
quite do it here.
Martin just excitedly go right away to cast it before the auto tapper highlights what it's going to tap. He realizes, no 3rd green mana, so am I going to have to rely on this actually getting a turn to untap? Now the good thing is, protection from blue means Teferi can't manage the Ceratops. Shota will actually have to find a dedicated black removal spell for it. So he is thinking about offering up a Teferi at the sacrificial altar of Shifting Ceratops. He, of course, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, the much more powerful card on this board state, but 5 loyalty, it's just going to die to the Ceratops. He's going to go for it anyway, thinking, if I can find an instant speed removal spell off my draw, that's lights out. And if not, at least I get to replace my Planeswalker, use my mana effectively.
Yeah, and 5 damage also adds up pretty quickly, even though it seems like Martin is more interested in taking care of Planeswalkers at this point in the game. It can matter down the line. But unfortunately for Shota, he did not find an answer for the Shifting Ceratops, so it's going to get to crash in and pick off a Planeswalker of Juza's choosing. And that is normally the one that people choose, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Wow, when you can, set up a scenario where your opponent basically just gets to cycle Teferi, you got to be happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think anyone who's played a lot of Magic over the last 2 years has had enough experience losing to the Hero of Dominaria that you just get that crisp, satisfying feeling when it goes to the graveyard. Like, man, I'm still in this.
Feels so good. Shifting Ceratops is a nightmare. It really is difficult. I mean, they have to keep in black removal to kill it, and that's not necessarily what they want to be doing. And now look, here's Tamiyo, Collector of Tales, getting back Nissa, who shakes the world, and Martin's looking very threatening here.
Yeah, now the
Elder Spell.
Ceratops is just putting a huge wrench in the wheels for Shota, because this Esper deck, the whole game plan is that snowball game plan of let me get one Planeswalker into the battlefield, untap with that one, add another, disrupt you, and snowball in that way. with the prospect that he's just never going to get to untap with a Planeswalker, this becomes a lot more difficult for him. He's having to use these sort of small exchanges and one-for-one removal spells, and that's just not what he wants to be doing. He really wants, at this mid-game stage, to be able to drop the hammer and stick these Planeswalkers.
Let's see if he can find a removal spell. Cast down, he may have access to some number of post-board. Noxious Grasp he does have in his sideboard, though I don't know that he'd bring it in.
He did bring those in,
Okay.
which those are a nice hedge against the Ceratops because at worst they can always kill Tamiyo or Nissa.
In the meantime, he probably needs to fire off something here to deal with Nissa. He can take it away with Duress, or he can try to set up an Elder spell.
Yeah, you know, if I'm the Esper player, I'm taking my spots when I can get them with Duress and Thought Erasure because the prospect of waiting.
Oh, Tamiyo, sorry.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So I guess this is not one of those spots where I can.
We got it right in time there, Reed. This is not one of those spots. But yeah, Tamiyo doing a good job of protecting what is now going to be Nissa on the battlefield, plus the Ceratops. And again, these Planeswalkers are just falling very quickly. If Martin wants, he can kill both this turn. Wow. This is interesting, because when you turn these Planeswalkers into draw spells, like Teferi 5 mana, draw a card, untap 2 lands on your end step, Narset, just a one-shot, look at the 4, take a non-creature, like, they don't look that good.
Now, I will point out that if Martin plays this turn in the obvious way of just casting Nissa and killing both Planeswalkers, he runs the risk of immediately losing to that Elder spell in Yasooka's hand, because you can imagine a 7th land untapped, or actually he's already got 7, so he's got 7 lined up. He can just cast Teferi, starts on 4 loyalty, Elder spell the 2 opposing Planeswalkers, ultimate right away, and sure, he's facing down some threatening permanents, but eventually that Hero of Dominaria ultimate is pretty inexorable.
Right, the emblem has no color.
Right.
Right, so it can take care of the Ceratops and then start working on the mana base here of Juza. So how does Martin navigate this then? Does he know about the Elder spell?
He does not know about the Elder spell.
He only knows about Teferi, Hero of Dominaria in hand.
So I think the dust is going to settle here, and we're going to have no Planeswalkers on either side, and it's going to be shifting Ceratops against Emblem.
I like Emblem.
I like Emblem as well.
Wow. Is Shota going to steal one here with the Elder Spell combo? I guess this is the benefit that he gets for having, really kind of just gone through his library the last few turns and exchanged resources in a way that he doesn't want to.
I got an additional wrinkle here, which is that Shota's at 16 life. So if Martin just untaps and attacks for 8, Hinterland Harbor has Vigilance. A 7th land will allow him to cast Nexus of Fate and just attack for 8 twice. So he can actually beat the Emblem. He has this 1-turn window to do so.
Oh, so he needs to find an untapped land here?
Yep, he had 2 shots between his first growth spiral and his draw step. He bricked the first time. Is this going to be an untapped land?
Oh, wait, but can Shota... Does Shota have a land drop to give? He does, so he can duress away the Nexus of Fate. Oh, now that the Tamiyo's off the board, the way is clear, and it was going to be a land,
wow,
too.
So everything just perfectly in place for Shota. Now, the game is not over. He is restricted to just his 1 draw step every turn, so Martin still gets to play, at least for the immediate term, until Yasooka can find another source of card drawing.
So he hits him for 8 down to 6. It's got to be funny for Martin here, too, knowing how close this is now. But now he can actually cast his card draw spells and have them do things. It's a Blast Zone. He can play that and the other land in his hand here to get an activation on Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
Now, is there any advantage to using it right away? You could find another Azcanta. Doesn't really do much, but So the advantage of using it right away is he could find something he can cast. The disadvantage is your opponent could draw a discard spell and take it away from you. And there it is, discard spell. So I like Martin's decision to wait until the end of the turn for activating Azcanta.
As we mentioned before, the emblem itself does not have a color, so he can use it to kill the shifting Ceratops, which is exactly what he did.
The
But
huge
the Bell
thing
Hunt
about
was
the
just
Bell Hunt-
fantastic, right?
Right, it's a blocker for the land. It puts Shota's life total out of range, and you got to figure with the Teferi emblem, each turn that progresses just tremendously in favor of the Esper player.
Right, so that Basilica Bell Hunt off the top of the library, well,
Oh wow, I'm surprised that Martin didn't just cash that in for a card draw.
may not have had the mana to do so. The green source, is that possible?
Only if he allowed the auto tapper to do the Azcanta for him. If he
the-
had been careful, he could have end of turn Veil of Summer, because of course that just says if your opponent cast a blue or black spell
Right.
this turn. So there's no shielding yourself, but you can just cycle it, which I think would have been appropriate given the desperation of the situation. But don't forget, the emblem is of Teferi Hero Dominaria. That takes effect every time Yasooka gets a turn, a draw step. So if Martin can enact his deck's main game plan here and start comboing off and taking all of the turns, he will be safe from the emblem. What a fascinating game. I can't believe that this developed in such a specific way.
Yeah, it really had to go very specific way to get to this point, but it has. But this is going to get very, very difficult now for Martin Juza. What does a win look like from this point for him?
So it could have started with finding Nexus of Fate off of this activation. He was not so lucky. So now he has the choice of putting a second copy of either of his two combo pieces onto the battlefield, Wilderness Reclamation or Search for Azcanta, and he's got to think the emblem is going to eliminate whatever I have one copy of, right? So Shota's primary goal here is to not leave Juza with both a Reclamation and an Azcanta. So whichever one Martin does not protect, Shota is going to exile with the emblem trigger.
Shota is not messing around. He's using the trigger from the Teferi emblem to take out Azcanta the Sunken Ruin right now. Now Martin's going to activate it in response, and as you mentioned, did put a Search for Azcanta into his hand last turn, so he has a backup plan there. But his resources are going to start dwindling. And a second copy of Basilica Bell Hunt was the draw step here for Shota.
So I would like to see Veil of Summer from Juza. Again, it's not going to protect him from the Bell Hunt trigger, but it is a way to just cycle this card, and I think he needs to do so. He needs to find some action, and quickly.
Yeah, that Teferi emblem is one of the most real clocks you can get in Standard. It just slowly but surely will grind you down to
Huge
no permanence.
draw.
What did he find? Draw from Dreams.
So I'm actually seeing a realistic route to victory here. If Martin keeps Search for Azcanta and Drawn from Dreams, he can cast them both, and if the Drawn from Dreams finds Nexus of Fate, then we're off to the races. It's a lot of ifs, but it is possible.
You can see Martin being very precise here. And there's
Wow.
a Nexus of Fate, the easy way read right off the top of the library for Martin.
I actually think Martin has become likely to win this game.
This is incredibly swingy match between these two players. What a treat for us to get a chance to watch here at MPL Weekly. And now we're going to see Drawn from Dreams, Search for Azcanta, and Nexus of Fate. Are there what else can he find here? There's a Tameo.
Probably the best card that he could put as a complement to his combo here. Tameo does dig quite a few cards deeper to find Nexus of Fate, and it reduces the size of your library quickly. So Juza wants to get to that spot where he's seeing a tremendous percentage of his library every turn to find those Nexuses, and Tameo can help him get to that position quickly.
All right, there's Nexus of Fate going on to the stack.
Hey, keep that one.
That's just... Yeah, because he's going to transform this search anyway, right?
Yep.
Because that's kind of what that turns on, right? Is it just gets you more active. Each Wilderness Reclamation are more search for his Kenta activations. Now, he had his other one exiled, but this one is going to transform, so he's good to go. Wow, what a turnaround. Again, I've already said that twice this game.
Now keep in mind, it was the Elder spell that killed the original Nissa who shakes the world. It was not the Hero of Dominaria emblem. So that means that it's in Yuza's graveyard to pick up with the Tameo -3 once he's ready to do so. I think the first thing he's going to do is just use a couple of pluses to reduce the size of his library and help find those nexuses. But once he gets to a position where he's comfortable taking many turns in a row, then he can pick up his win condition and actually put more pressure on Shota's life total yet again.
Now, where are we at right now, though? He's -3 right now, it looks like.
Okay, so drawn from dreams.
Because he needs to dig as deep as possible, right? He doesn't actually have a Nexus of Fate available.
No, I don't even think this digs deeper, though, because he could have played another Reclamation, which gives another search for his Kanta activation, and the plus from Tameo, so that's 9 cards as compared to 7. So I would have made a different choice from Martin on that particular snapshot.
Well, as it turned out, he found 2 copies of it withdrawn from Dreams, so it did end up working out for him one way or the other. And now he gets really just to kind of go off. He gets to play the Wilderness Reclamation. That'll be the second one on the battlefield. He can dig further into his library, and he has the backup Nexus of Fate ready to go as well. So things looking very good. I can't believe I'm saying this for Martin Juza now.
Yeah, I don't think Shota's going to get another turn in this game.
Shota is going to lose with a Teferi emblem just sitting there. And by the way, it's been used multiple times this
absolutely.
game. That almost never happens. It's extremely rare to emblem Teferi and lose, especially after he's gotten multiple draw steps in the interim. Maybe Teferi's not as good as we thought, Reed.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Marshall, this Esper deck was, I think, the consensus best deck. Wow, are we seeing good games from these players? It was the best deck before the printing of M20. M20 brought a lot of cards.
Wow! Martin Juza defeats, sorry to interrupt you, Reed, defeats Shota Yasooka in a real thriller, a back and forth match that ended up in the hands of the Nexus players somehow, some way, through all the hate. Remember the opener? It's like duress. I mean, it's just like ripped
and then
apart
2
his
Thought
head.
Erasures right after
Yeah.
as well. I've never seen someone get the Teferi emblem and not win.
Yeah,
So that
and
was
get
exciting.
to untap multiple times. It wasn't just like emblem, okay, attack you with all my things I lose.
Right.
It was even better than that. That's incredible.
Ooh,
Wow.
just the power of the Nexus of Fate. And
Jeez. Great
being
job,
able-
Martin Juza.
Yeah, that was impressive.
He had to stick with that one. I mean, there's a lot of times when you could have been like, yeah, I guess this just isn't my game. And he didn't. He really just sort of methodically worked his way through and found the win.
Well, Nexus of Fate, I mean, the Simic Nexus, you just need that one card, and
Guess so.
then they never get the draw step again. We do have an interview with Martin Juza. Paul Gian speaks to him.
Hello, I am joined here with Martin Juza winning a ridiculous match against Shota Yasooka. I mean, I have so many. My cue card is just completely full because that thing was so back and forth.
Yeah, it was a crazy match. I have so many questions too. Like I'm pretty sure I made a few mistakes, but it's really so complicated to play it on Arena. And like I'm always like, you need to not forget to set your stuff for the end of turn. You need to keep in mind a million other things. And I'm pretty sure I could have done a few things here and there a little better, but overall, I think it was a pretty cool match for the viewers.
Oh my God, yeah, definitely. When I was watching that third game specifically, I mean, at some points I was like, man, Martin's super far ahead. You had the Ceratops in play, you had all the action going on. It's like, okay, well, he's probably just going to win this. I think it's over. And then Shota set up that turn with the Teferi plus Elder spell play.
Yeah, that was really good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had him on the 2-turn clock. Then he drew the Bell Hunt, so you couldn't attack with the 3/3 anymore. And then he had the emblem to kill your Askanta, and at that point, I thought he had it. You know, at that point, with Teferi emblem, you had no pressure. And, like, I don't even know what was going through your mind then. Like, how were you able to kind of piece things back together and just, like, you know, come back and find out what you
Well,
need to do to win?
At that point, I knew that if he gets a turn back, he's gonna start triggering the emblems and start exiling my stuff. So my plan is just he never gets another turn, right? And I just need to I need to set up another reclamation plus Ascanta and all the time walks. But because I brought in so many cards, I had to board down to 2 Nexus. So it's not that easy to combo after sideboard because you only have 2 Nexus in your deck.
Wait, didn't you play Drawn from Dreams and hit 2 Nexuses?
Yeah, at some point, but at that point my deck was 20 cards or something. So
Okay.
plus I was able to use Ascanta multiple times in a turn. So
Yeah, I mean, that was a completely ridiculous match. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that Drawn from Dreams, because I think that's kind of a big shift that we've seen in the deck. Most people kind of going for Chemist's Insight as the way to draw cards because it synergizes with Wilderness Reclamation. Why did you choose to go with Drawn from Dreams instead?
I think it's a really good card that's a little underplayed right now. It's basically Dig Through Time. That card is banned in Modern.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially this is the type of deck where you're really digging for specific combo pieces to actually just try to go off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have a question in terms of your deck selection, right? Coming into this, I don't think a lot of people would peg you as a Nexus of Fate player, right? We know you like to attack and give people the beatdowns. Why did you choose to switch to the Nexus of Fate deck for the top 4?
So we were thinking with Paul, what are they gonna think, and are we gonna switch? We actually thought that Seth might do the switch to vampires because that makes some sense. Because you were thinking are they gonna switch? What if they don't? I still want my deck to be competitive against red, but I want to beat the decks that they might switch into. And at that point, I'm just I don't think Shota's gonna switch. He likes his Esper deck. He's been playing it for a long time. So I'm okay, I'm just hoping that they're gonna think that I never switch. I'm always the aggro guy. I always play mono red. I always play vampires. I always play whatever aggro deck you can play. I'm gonna play the deck that they're not gonna expect me to play, which is Nexus. Because I even have a hard time clicking through Nexus when I play a ladder when I stream. I'm just oh, I forgot to set the enough turn stop again. I guess I lose or whatever. That just happens every other game. So I'm I just spent the entire day today just playing Nexus so that I have the habit of setting the stop at the end of turn and doing all the things that I need to do.
Yeah, and I think you definitely caught a lot of these players off guard because they just kind of would have expected you to play mono red or probably even vampires. If I was playing the top 4, that's probably what I would have pegged you at. One of those two aggro decks in a format. So big swap, and I mean that's also just a testament to all you guys. You guys are in the MPL, so you guys should be able to pivot and play out different decks. And it looks like we have a little guest here as well.
We do. My little ginger friend.
Your little ginger friend saying hi to the stream. All right. Well, we have another match lined up for you. You're going to be playing your teammate, Paulo Vitor, in the lower bracket finals. Now, what do you think about kind of that mirror match? You have some changes to your list. Do you think that favors you, or is it still roughly the same?
I think it's still a coin flip. I'm only playing two fog, 2 root snares, but as you could see in game 1 against Shota, on turn 3 I had both of the root snares in my hand, which is the worst possible card I can draw against him. So it's still going to be a coin flip. It's a mirror match where we're both comboing off. We don't have a lot of interaction pre-board, so game 1 is just going to be most of the time it's going to be whoever's going to be on the play, and then after sideboard, the game gets a little interesting. Sometimes you tap out for a sorcery speed card, and your opponent, plays negate, untaps, plays their own reclamation, and starts comboing off. So it's gonna be interesting after sideboard for sure. And I think in this matchup, playing Chemist's Insight is probably better than Drawn from the Dreams. Game 1 might be a little better for me since I have the Drawn from Dreams are a little better when you're comboing off than Chemist's Insight. But it's still, whoever's going to go, turn 2, Growth Spiral into turn 3, Reclamation into, stuff or whatever is definitely going to be favored.
Right, of course. You do have another match going up against your buddy, Paulo Vitor. Best of luck in the next round.
Thank you.
For us.
All right, so there you have it from Martin Juza.
Cat power.
Cat power, for sure. Kropik.
Yeah.
Kropik the cat.
Yep.
Mad love for the ginger cat. as opposed to all other cats, which are hit or miss.
Especially your cat, who I feel so bad for
No, he's
now.
a very sweet cat. It's just he's not my
can't,
dog.
Don't say that now.
Now,
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting what Paul pointed out, the versatility of Juza as a player. He said he loves to play aggressive strategies, which we know about him, and yet still chose to play this incredibly tricky to click on arena deck. You
Tricky
can't
to
mess
click
up
on arena deck, yes.
I was going to say tricky clicky.
Tricky clicky, that's
tricky
good
clicky
too.
deck?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, he was really smart to take the time to make sure that he got all that stuff down, because it does take once. Like you don't click that end step stop, and all of your wilderness reclamations just are like, yeah, we're done, we're resolving, and you're just through it, and all. That could easily be it. Like, you could lose the game.
I want to make my mana flow. Wait, hold on, go back, go back. You can't go
and
back.
it's over. And so, taking the time to just get those mechanics down was really smart by him, and it paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was an elimination match for Shota Yasooka. Of course, he will be in the Mythic Championship 5, but not straight to day 2 this time around.
He's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, so the stakes are high. We've got 2 more matches for you today. But first, we want to remind you where you can find the rest of round robin play from earlier in this week. And make sure you go to magic.dg. You can check out the new features on our Magic Esports site, find the full rosters and results from every single match in the core split play. There's a VOD for each one. Just hit that sideways triangle to make it play for you. Dive into what your favorite players did during the core split. And you can check it all out at magic.gg. You guys been perusing magic.gg there?
Sure.
Checking it out?
Yeah.
I'm glad that we've made it very accessible for everybody to watch all those matches, and we've made it even more exciting this split by having the entire division play out and just walk away with one person moving on straight
I love
to day
this
2.
format, Becca.
Yeah,
it is so fun to be able
Stakes
to
upped.
to get the stakes up and to make it so clear for us watching, and of course for you at home, what's on the line and what's going to happen in each round. Where before it was kind of like, well, this puts them in a really good position, but we have to kind of wait to see what other people do. Here it's just like, this person knocked this person out, they're through.
I want results, and we are getting them in this core split. Also, this is a very exciting weekend because it's the Mythic Championship Qualifier weekend for people who have grinded their way to the top on Arena. 16 people will be moving on to the to get to compete in Long Beach. That's October 18th. It's a 3-day is when it starts. It's a 3-day tournament. Yeah. And of course, we'll all be there.
Yeah, it's everything we're
Spoilers?
doing this weekend is sort of a setup for that event. So that's what you want to be, marking on your calendars, clearing your schedule. If you're a Magic fan, that is the show to watch. Be there.
Yeah.
Or be square, as they say. All right, we have so much more to get to after a break, so stay tuned. Don't leave your seat. More Magic coming your way.